we first arrived in South Africa in 1997, I couldn't speak any English. At that time, we had lived in 4 countries in a period of 3 years, desperately trying to find a safe place, a new place to call home. We had been in hiding more times than I can even remember, lest we'd be killed if we were discovered. But more than anything else, we were tired, poor, and homeless. That first day when we arrived in Durban, we had no money and no place to live, so we slept on the floor of the bus station near NMR Avenue near the road. Fast forward to 2008, 11 years after we first arrived in SA, and I was appointed the head prefect of my high school. I finished matric with A's in all 8 of my subjects, and I was awarded a scholarship to study medicine at the University of Cape Town, a scholarship that would cover tuition, room, and board for the 6 years of my degree. In May this year, I graduated from Yale University with a Bachelor of Arts, and I had the honor in June of being nominated and then invited to attend the Town Hall for Young African Leaders that was held by President Obama during his visit to the country in June. Now, I don't like to publicly admit to my achievements in this way, but I feel that on a platform such as this, it is necessary to do so because of the potential that my testimony has to do good in the lives of others who have been where I have been, or those who are able to help people who are in a position that I was in as well. When we left Rwanda, I was 4 years old. It was 1994. So many people often think that I don't remember what it was like living in Rwanda, but I do. I know that my parents were well off. My father was a lecturer at the university, and my mom was a bookkeeper at the same university. So the house that we lived in was a grand house. My parents didn't pay rent. All they paid for was electricity, so my mom was able to afford to hire 2 maids full-time to help her take care of the household. I also remember that we had a dog, a black dog. His name was Milu, and he once almost bit my hand off when I tried to take a bone away from him. I remember that there was a flight of stairs leading from the front gate of our house up to the front door, and I fearlessly rode my older sister's bicycle down those stairs. However, all of this changed almost in a moment in 1994. The genocide, as it's come to be known, was a series of mass killings that started in Kigali in April 1994. Many people do not know this, but there was a civil war in Rwanda in 1990, a month before I was born. And there had been tension in the country in the years prior to this. So what happened in 94 was a culmination of this tension, anxiety, and instability politically in the country. So we'd been living peacefully when this happened in 94. And although we did not live in Kigali, the capital city of Rwanda, where the genocide started, we lived a few kilometers further south in a different city. But at the time, my mom was in the capital. She had gone over there to try and find a job because my father had been offered a new position in the capital, and so we're in the process of moving over, basically. When it started, we didn't know she'll be able to get back to her safely. But somehow she managed to get into a shelter underground where she hid with some people for a while. And she even came home one day, came back to the shelter one day and found a bullet on her bed, where she would have been if she hadn't gone out that day. But luckily she managed to find her way back home to us in the south. So we did not leave as soon as the genocide started. We knew it was happening, but my parents didn't think it would reach us that far south. But when it became clear that things were not as they should have been and that the violence was spreading, my parents decided it was time to leave. So my father got on his bicycle, he cycled to the university, collected some documents that would allow us and my mom and my sister and I to travel across borders if necessary. He came home, my parents packed what little things they could carry, leaving behind our jewelry, our family photos, and our house, and we fled our home. We fled towards the southwest of Rwanda to a town near the border of the DRC, which is where my mom's sister lived. We stayed with them for a few months, but then when we realized that the violence was spreading even further, we crossed the border into the DRC on foot. We lived in the Democratic Republic of Congo in a refugee camp for a few months before leaving and going to Kenya. In Kenya, my younger sister was born, but it was unsafe for us to remain there once again, so we moved to Swaziland, and then to Mozambique, then back to Swaziland, and then to South Africa. When we arrived in South Africa, the first place that we lived in is a part of Durban that actually no longer exists. It was called Camperdown and used to be situated where Shaka Marine World is now. And one of my history teachers from high school recently told me that Camperdown is one of the poorest parts of Durban that any person could live. It was since condemned and torn down. The first house that we lived in was really just one room. It was the largest room which we shared with another family, and we slept there, ate there, and bathed in the same room. There was no toilet attached to our room, so we shared the toilets that were in the corridor with the other people on the floor. At this time, my father was offered a lecturing position at a university in Durban. But because at the time we had not already been given our refugee statuses, we had a document, an asylum document, that had to be renewed every 3 months. So the university didn't feel comfortable hiring him because they weren't sure if he'd be able to renew his documents after those 3 months. It was at that point that my parents realized that we're not going to be able to pick our lives up from where we'd left them all before '94 and just carry on. We'd have to start from scratch. So my father started working as a security guard at the docks of Durban Harbour, and my mom worked as a laundromat worker, washing and ironing clothes. At this time, I also experienced a lot of frustration, not just because I had to watch my parents doing back-breaking work for which they were paid very little, even though I knew they were qualified to do so much more, but also because I was frustrated at having to learn a whole new language when I was surrounded by people who spoke not just English, but Afrikaans and Zulu, that didn't understand, and people who were very different to me. My teacher in grade 2 once secretly encouraged my classmates to include me more at break time, because I usually sat alone on the field and watched as other people played. But I remember also hearing her taking one of these little boys aside and asking him, why haven't you been including her? She's still such a loner, she sits by herself, she doesn't talk to anyone, and he shouldn't know I was hearing this, but he was saying that he had really tried everything they could, and I remember him asking me over and over again, please come and play with us, teacher says you must come and play with us, and I was just too afraid, frustrated, and overwhelmed. But what saved me from this potentially crippling situation was realizing that education is a possible way out of poverty. I had observed that upon arriving to Durban, many refugees did one of two things. They would either get a job, no matter how menial, and enroll themselves, in order to be able to enroll their children into school, or on the other hand, they would enroll themselves in school in order to get some kind of degree or certification that would allow them to do any kind of job in this country, because many of the degrees they got in their home countries were not recognized in SA. So I knew that my parents wouldn't let me drop out of school in grade 2, so I decided the best thing to do would be to work really hard in school. That was my mission, my goal when I was 8 years old. I wanted to do really well in school, to get scholarships and have my tuition paid off so my parents wouldn't have to worry about this burden. So we carried on in this way, and slowly we met people. We formed new communities with other refugees and local people as well, and started to really rebuild our lives and make Durban our home. We'd play on the beachfront, take pictures there. Starting to feel as though we really belonged here. However, in August 2000, tragedy struck when my father passed away. And of everything that happened to us at this stage, this was the most devastating thing, for many reasons. Mostly because my dad and I were very, very close. We shared a love of reading and writing, and for whatever reason, he always asked me to make him a cup of coffee after work, even though I loathed it. But also my father was the breadwinner of the family. He was taking care of all the bills as my mom was staying at home to help us with homework. And also, he was the one who spoke the most English in the family, and so he had been the one navigating all the political and necessary avenues of living in South Africa. So at this point in time, my mom was now the sole breadwinner of our family, and she had to take care of 3 little girls, clothe them, feed them, make sure they stayed enrolled in school, and also take care of our mental and our physical health. It was at this time, ironically, during the very tough years that followed, that we really began to experience the generosity and kindness of our friends, our neighbors, and complete strangers. One of these people was my primary school principal. When my older sister and I enrolled in our high school, my mom was not able to afford to buy us our stationery. So at the beginning of each year, we would go to her with our stationery list, and she would take us on a shopping spree and buy us all the pens and the pencils and the flip files and the books that we would need for the entire year. Similarly, my high school principal worked together with my guidance counselor to work out a way for my sister and I to get lunch in the school cafeteria, because this was taking another burden off my mom's shoulders, having to take care of that. So it was people like these, and this is just 2 very small examples of all the many ways in which people have really helped us along the way, not necessarily solving all of our problems, but addressing small issues that really made a difference. It is difficult to settle down in a new country, especially when you don't know what has happened to the rest of your family, to your possessions, and to your property. However, I stand before you today, a happy and whole person, mainly because of 4 reasons. The love and encouragement of my family, the solidarity and community that I make with other refugees in Durban, especially Rwandan ones, the hard work that I was determined to put into my studies in order to surmount my circumstances, and the kindness of the people I met along the way. I cannot adequately express to you how touching and helpful it is when someone invests their time, their money, or their expertise into either solving all of your problems or even a small part of one of your problems. My primary school principal did not necessarily address every need my family had by buying my sister and I stationery. However, her generosity took a huge load off my mom's shoulders. And her act of kindness boosted my morale and made me realize that someone cared whether I succeeded or not. It really made me feel as though I mattered, that someone saw me. So many refugees would similarly benefit from having someone invest in them in a big or a small way. One of these ways is perhaps showing them a place to learn the local language so they don't feel overwhelmed and like they're struggling. Or perhaps pointing them to other refugees who are from the same part of the world that they are, so that in this way they can keep their customs and their culture alive. While I was an undergraduate at Yale, I volunteered with an organization in the town that helps refugees settle down in the US. And one of their first considerations when they're trying to decide where to place someone is to find out where other people from their part of the world have been located. And in this way, they're willing to know about other people around. They can keep their cultures and customs alive, meet together, speak their language, and not feel as though they're losing who they are, especially when with the older generation feeling as though they're having to start their lives afresh, because it's easier for younger people. So my life is this testament to the fact not only that hard work really does pay off, but also that investing even a small amount of anything that you can into someone's life can truly make a significant positive difference and change their lives.